My backyard pool was not just a luxury. It represented 5 years of overtime shifts, careful saving, and countless weekends spent comparing designs and contractors. As a single homeowner in the Whispering Pines subdivision, I had stretched my budget to the absolute limit to create this private oasis. The sparkling blue water reflected the morning sun as I sipped my coffee before work, watching the light dance across the surface. This was my sanctuary, my reward for years of hard work. I had always been the quiet resident who followed every rule. My lawn was maintained at exactly the required height. My trash cans disappeared from the curb within the mandated 2-hour window after collection. My holiday decorations never exceeded the prescribed timeline in our HOA covenant. I attended every quarterly meeting but rarely spoke. I simply wanted to enjoy my modest home and my not-so-modest backyard pool in peace. The first sign that something was amiss came on a Wednesday evening in early summer. After returning from work, I noticed the pool furniture had been slightly rearranged. The lounge chair that always faced east was angled toward the south. The small table that held my morning coffee was pushed closer to the edge of the pool. It was subtle, but to someone who lived alone and was meticulous about their space, it felt wrong. I dismissed it initially. Perhaps the landscaper had moved things while maintaining the yard. But then I noticed the water level in the pool was lower than it should have been, about an inch below the automatic fill line that maintained the perfect height. The next day, I found a pink hair tie on the pool deck that definitely did not belong to me. There were also wet spots on the concrete in patterns that suggested multiple people had been exiting the pool. My concern grew over the next several days. A missing pool towel, sunscreen smears on the outdoor table, a wine cork partially hidden beneath a potted plant. Someone had not only been entering my property, but was apparently treating my pool as their own personal recreation center. My first thought was neighborhood teenagers. Summer had just begun, and the temptation of an unattended pool during school break would be strong. I considered posting a polite but firm notice on our community message board about respecting private property, but decided against calling attention to my absences from home. Instead, I invested in a set of small, discreet security cameras. I positioned them strategically, one with a view of the gate entrance, another overlooking the pool area, and a third aimed at the pool house. I connected them to my phone so I could receive motion alerts and check the footage remotely. The cameras were barely noticeable, nestled among garden decorations and porch fixtures. 3 days later, during my lunch break at work, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the backyard. I expected to see neighborhood kids sneaking in for a quick swim. What I saw instead made my stomach drop. There on my screen, clear as day, was Elizabeth Harrington, the president of our HOA, using a key to unlock my back gate. She walked with complete confidence, as if entering her own property. Behind her followed 3 women carrying tote bags and wearing swimsuits under light cover-ups. I stared at my phone in disbelief. The woman who had sent me a violation notice just last month for having my garbage can visible for 3 hours instead of 2 was now letting herself into my backyard with what appeared to be a master key. I watched, speechless, as she directed her friends to the pool chairs and began unpacking wine and snacks as if hosting at her own home. Elizabeth Harrington had ruled our HOA board with absolute authority for nearly 5 years. She was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed at all times, with a blonde bob that never moved and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Every homeowner in Whispering Pines knew her reputation. She was notorious for enforcing rules with selective precision, strict with those she disliked, and conveniently blind to violations committed by her inner circle. My first encounter with Elizabeth had been 3 months after moving in. I had installed a small bird feeder on my front porch, not realizing it violated the HOA covenant's restriction on unsanctioned outdoor feeding stations. The violation notice came with a $75 fine and a highlighted copy of the relevant section from our 94-page rulebook. When I attended the next meeting to respectfully request a variance, Elizabeth dismissed my appeal without allowing me to finish speaking. "Rules exist for a reason," she had said with that practiced smile. "If we make exceptions for bird feeders today, tomorrow someone will want a chicken coop. Is that what you want for our prestigious community? Livestock." The board members seated beside her nodded in perfect unison. My bird feeder was removed that evening. Over my 4 years in the neighborhood, I had witnessed Elizabeth's targeting of various homeowners. An elderly man fined repeatedly for his flower beds being 2 inches wider than regulation. A young family penalized for children's toys visible in their yard for more than the permitted 2 hours. A healthcare worker written up for leaving her car in the driveway instead of the garage during the height of the pandemic. Those who challenged her often found themselves subjected to random inspections that inevitably discovered additional violations. Now, reviewing the security footage from the past 2 weeks, I could see a clear pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday between 1:00 p.m. and 4:00 p.m. while I was reliably at work, Elizabeth used that master key to access my backyard. The groups varied, sometimes just 2 or 3 friends, other times as many as 8 people. They brought coolers, music speakers, and pool floats. They used my outdoor shower, my pool furniture, even my supply of pool chemicals to balance the chlorine, as I heard Elizabeth explain in one recording. On the most recent Thursday, I watched Elizabeth give what appeared to be a full tour of my backyard to a new friend. "The owner is some tech worker who is never home," she explained, gesturing dismissively toward my house. "The yard is wasted on him. He does not even entertain." The footage revealed something even more disturbing. The master key Elizabeth used was clearly labeled with a red tag, the emergency access keys that board members were only supposed to use for genuine safety concerns or maintenance emergencies. According to our HOA documents, those keys were stored in a locked box in the community office and required documentation each time they were removed. My hands shook with anger as I reviewed more footage. These were not quick, furtive visits by someone who knew they were trespassing. These were leisurely afternoon gatherings that sometimes lasted 3 hours. In one video, Elizabeth's friend accidentally knocked over a potted plant. Rather than cleaning it up, Elizabeth simply repositioned another plant to hide the soil stain on the concrete. The violation of privacy made my skin crawl. I lived alone in this house. How many times had she entered when I did not know? Had she been inside my home as well? The security cameras only covered the backyard and pool area. I debated confronting her directly but quickly dismissed the idea. Elizabeth had built a power structure within the HOA that protected her. She would deny everything, claim emergency inspections, or worse, find ways to retaliate through her position. I needed irrefutable evidence and a strategy that would expose her behavior beyond any possibility of denial or justification. As I sat watching the 6th unauthorized pool party in 3 weeks, something inside me hardened. This was not just about trespassing anymore. This was about years of unchecked power, selective enforcement, and the entitlement that had led Elizabeth to believe she could simply take whatever she wanted, including my private property. I needed to end this, not just for myself, but for every homeowner who had ever been bullied by her abuse of authority. I decided to begin my investigation by speaking with Tom Fisher, my next-door neighbor, and the only person on the street who seemed immune to Elizabeth's intimidation tactics. Tom was a retired attorney who kept to himself, but always offered a friendly wave when we crossed paths. His property was immaculate, not out of fear of HOA violations, but from genuine pride in his home. "I am not surprised," Tom said when I showed him the footage of Elizabeth using my pool. We sat at his kitchen table, voices lowered despite being inside his home. "Last summer, I installed a motion sensor camera after noticing items moved in my garden shed. Caught her examining my tool collection twice." "Did you confront her?" I asked. Tom's weathered face broke into a small smile. I left the camera footage playing on a loop on a monitor inside the shed with a note that said, "Smile for the camera, Elizabeth. Never had another unauthorized visit." This was the first confirmation that Elizabeth's trespassing extended beyond my property. When I asked if others might have experienced similar violations, Tom nodded gravely. The Millers down on Oakwood Drive mentioned finding cigarette butts in their hot tub cover when they returned from vacation. Elizabeth is the only smoker on the board. And Joan Chen found her garden furniture rearranged multiple times. Armed with this information, I began systematic research into our HOA bylaws and local trespassing laws. Spread across my dining room table were printed copies of our community covenant, property boundary documents, and highlighted sections of state residential codes. The HOA emergency access provision was clear. Master keys were strictly for maintenance emergencies, safety concerns, or authorized inspections, all requiring prior notice except in life-threatening situations. The provision stated explicitly, "Emergency access keys shall remain in the secure lockbox in the community office at all times when not in active emergency use. Each use must be logged with date, time, purpose, and return time." I requested copies of the access log through our HOA online portal, citing my right as a member to review board records. The response came 3 days later, access logs showing no record of my property being entered. Either the entries were never made, or Elizabeth had bypassed the log entirely by keeping the key in her personal possession. Both scenarios constituted serious violations of HOA policy. My friend Sarah, a real estate attorney, reviewed my growing file of evidence during a video call one evening. "This is not just an HOA violation," she explained, pointing to specific sections of the documentation. "This constitutes criminal trespassing, unauthorized use of restricted access, and potentially breaking and entering. The fact that she is using her position of authority and HOA resources to facilitate these actions makes it even more serious." Sarah helped me organize my evidence chronologically, creating a comprehensive documentation package. For each unauthorized entry, I noted date and time of entry, duration of stay, number of people brought onto the property, any items used, moved, or damaged, clear still images showing Elizabeth using the master key, transcripts of relevant conversations captured by the audio. The pattern was unmistakable. Over a 3-week period, Elizabeth had used my pool without permission 8 times, bringing a total of 26 different guests. The footage showed them using my outdoor furniture, bathroom facilities, and even helping themselves to pool equipment and cleaning supplies from the storage cabinet. "What do you want to come from this?" Sarah asked after reviewing everything. An apology, financial compensation for trespassing, her removal from the board. The question made me pause. What did I want? Initially, I had just wanted the invasions to stop. Now, seeing the extent of the violations and remembering years of Elizabeth's selective enforcement and intimidation of neighbors, I wanted accountability. "I want her to face actual consequences," I finally answered. She has used her position to bully people for years while breaking rules herself. I want that exposed." Sarah nodded. "Then you need a strategic approach. If you simply confront her, she will deny everything, claim it was an emergency inspection, or find ways to retaliate." Together, we formulated a plan. Based on the established pattern, Elizabeth's largest gatherings occurred on Thursdays, typically with 6 to 8 friends. The forecast showed clear weather for the coming Thursday, making it likely she would continue her pattern. This would be the perfect opportunity for a controlled confrontation with proper witnesses and authorities present. "Document everything," Sarah advised, "but be careful not to tip your hand until the moment of maximum impact. Elizabeth has maintained her position because she controls the narrative. Your advantage is that she does not know that you know." I circled next Thursday on my calendar, the day Elizabeth Harrington would learn that no HOA presidency put her above the law. My hands were steady now, my earlier anxiety replaced by resolute determination. This was no longer just about my violated privacy. It was about holding accountable someone who had abused power for far too long. When Thursday morning arrived, I called my supervisor to request a personal day. "Family emergency," I explained vaguely, knowing that watching someone break into your property in real time probably qualified as an emergency, even if the family part was a stretch. My request was approved without question. I rarely took time off and had accumulated weeks of unused personal days. I began preparations at dawn. First, I installed 2 additional security cameras with improved audio capabilities. One went above the back door with a clear view of the entire pool area, while another was positioned discreetly inside a decorative lantern near the pool equipment. These would provide coverage from angles my existing cameras missed, ensuring there would be no blind spots. Next came the subtle markers that would prove someone had entered the property. I applied a small amount of invisible ink to the inside handle of the gate, the kind that only shows under ultraviolet light. Anyone using the gate would unknowingly transfer traces to their hands. I placed a thin strand of clear fishing line across the path at ankle height, not enough to trip someone, but positioned so it would break when someone walked through. I also adjusted several objects around the pool area into specific positions that I photographed for documentation. I texted Tom next door, "Operation Pool Party is happening today. Your security camera aimed at the street might catch some interesting arrivals around 1 p.m. Tom responded immediately with a thumbs-up emoji and will have it recording. Good luck. At 11:30 a.m., I called the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher who answered was professional and attentive as I explained the situation. I have documented evidence of ongoing criminal trespassing at my residence. The same individual has broken into my property 8 times in the past 3 weeks and is likely to return today around 1 p.m. based on established patterns. Have you confronted this person? The dispatcher asked. No, I have been gathering evidence. The trespasser is the president of my HOA who is misusing a master emergency key to access my property while I am normally at work. I have video footage of all previous incidents. The dispatcher took my information and assured me an officer would arrive at approximately 1:15 p.m. Please do not confront the trespasser before the officer arrives, she advised. Document everything from a safe distance. As the appointed hour approached, I positioned myself in my home office, which offered a view of the street through one window and the backyard through another. My laptop was open with all the evidence files organized and ready to show the responding officer. My hands trembled slightly as I poured a glass of water. Despite all my preparation, Confrontation had never been my strong suit. At 12:54 p.m., exactly as predicted, Elizabeth's silver Mercedes SUV pulled into the guest parking area across from my house. I watched through the window as she emerged wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and designer sunglasses, carrying a large beach tote. Behind her came a parade of vehicles, a white Lexus, a black BMW, and a red Audi. 8 women in total, all dressed in swimwear covered by light summer wraps and carrying coolers, bags, and pool floats. I started recording with my phone as Elizabeth led her entourage confidently down the side path toward my backyard gate. She reached into her purse, removed the master key with its distinctive red tag, and unlocked my gate with practiced ease. The group disappeared from street view, but my security camera feed on the laptop showed them entering my backyard, laughing and chatting as if arriving at a reserved resort. "Make yourselves comfortable, ladies," Elizabeth announced, placing her bag on my patio table. "I brought that wonderful rosé we had last time. Cynthia, can you set up the music? The Bluetooth speaker is fully charged." I watched as they spread out around my pool area, claiming chairs, unpacking wine bottles and plastic cups, arranging cheese plates on my patio furniture. One woman immediately shed her cover-up and slipped into the pool with a contented sigh. Another adjusted the umbrella for better shade. Elizabeth began distributing wine as if hosting in her own backyard. At 1:12 p.m., a police cruiser pulled up quietly and parked across the street. Through my window, I watched an officer step out, a tall woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She approached my front door with a professional demeanor that betrayed nothing to any watching neighbors. The doorbell rang and I took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. I opened the front door and greeted the officer in a hushed voice. Her name badge read Officer Martinez. She maintained a professional expression as I quickly explained the situation. "They arrived about 20 minutes ago," I said, leading her to my laptop. 8 women in total. Here is the live feed from my backyard cameras. Officer Martinez leaned forward, studying the screen with focused attention. The footage showed Elizabeth and her friends fully settled around my pool. 2 women were in the water, 3 lounged on my deck chairs with wine glasses in hand, and Elizabeth herself was adjusting the outdoor speaker volume. They had spread out food on my patio table, cheese, crackers, and fruit arranged on plates they had brought. "And you have documentation of previous incidents?" Officer Martinez asked. I nodded, opening a folder on my laptop. 8 separate occasions in the past 3 weeks, always when I would normally be at work. Here is the HOA documentation showing emergency keys are only for actual emergencies with required documentation. And here is confirmation from the HOA office that no emergency access was logged for my property. Officer Martinez reviewed the evidence efficiently, her expression remaining neutral but her eyes narrowing slightly at the footage of Elizabeth using the master key. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked directly. "Yes," I answered without hesitation, "for trespassing at minimum." "Understood. I will need to speak with them and get identification. Would you like to accompany me to your backyard?" My heart raced as I nodded. We walked through my house to the back door. Through the glass, I could see Elizabeth refilling wine glasses as another woman adjusted the music volume. They were completely at ease, laughing at something one of the women had said. "Ready?" Officer Martinez asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. We stepped out onto the patio, and for 3 full seconds, no one noticed us. Then one woman glanced up, her smile freezing on her face. She nudged the person next to her, and like dominoes, each head turned until Elizabeth finally sensed the change in atmosphere and looked over her shoulder. The expression on her face shifted from confusion to shock to indignation in the span of seconds. She stood up straight, wine glass still in hand, and stared at me as if I was the intruder. "What do you think you are doing home?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the pool area. "You are never home on Thursdays." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Ma'am, I am Officer Martinez with the City Police Department. I need to speak with you about your presence on this property." Elizabeth blinked, as if just noticing the uniform. She quickly adjusted her posture and adopted the confident smile I had seen her use at HOA meetings when shutting down homeowner complaints. "Officer, there must be some confusion. As HOA president, I have authority to conduct property inspections. We received complaints about pool maintenance issues that could affect neighboring properties." I remained silent, following Sarah's advice to let the officer handle the initial confrontation. Officer Martinez maintained her professional demeanor. "May I see some identification, please?" she requested. "This is ridiculous," Elizabeth said, but reached for her purse. "I am performing my duties as HOA president. The bylaws clearly state." "I am familiar with the HOA bylaws," I interrupted quietly. "They state that emergency access requires documentation and immediate notification to the homeowner. They do not authorize wine parties with friends." Elizabeth's face flushed. Her friends had gone completely silent, several of them now hurriedly gathering their belongings. The two women in the pool were frozen, as if unsure whether to get out or remain in the water. "The homeowner has provided me with video evidence of multiple unauthorized entries to this property," Officer Martinez continued. "May I see the key you used to access this gate?" Elizabeth's composure visibly cracked. "This is a misunderstanding," she insisted, her voice rising. "As board president, I have inspection rights." "The key, ma'am," Officer Martinez repeated calmly but firmly. With trembling fingers, Elizabeth removed the red-tagged master key from her purse. Officer Martinez examined it, noting the emergency access only label clearly visible. "According to the documentation I have reviewed, this key is only authorized for emergency use and must be signed out from the community office with proper documentation. Did you sign this key out today for an emergency inspection?" "I did not need to," Elizabeth said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "As president." "The bylaws make no exception for the president," I interjected. "And they certainly do not authorize bringing guests for pool parties. This is the 8th time in 3 weeks you have entered my property without permission." At this, Elizabeth's friends exchanged alarmed glances. One woman whispered, "You said you had permission," loud enough for everyone to hear. "He is never home," Elizabeth snapped at her friend, then immediately seemed to realize her mistake. "So you were aware the homeowner was not present and did not have permission," Officer Martinez clarified, making notes on her pad. "And the wine, food, and music were part of the emergency inspection." Elizabeth's composure collapsed entirely. "Do you have any idea who I am in this community?" she demanded, voice rising to a near shout. "I have been president of this HOA for 5 years. I have maintained property values while ungrateful residents like him," she jabbed a finger toward me, "break rules constantly." "What rules have I broken?" I asked calmly. "Your grass was a 1/4 inch too high last month," she shot back, face reddening. "And you had a bird feeder without approval my first year here." Officer Martinez intervened. "Ma'am, I need identification from everyone present, and then I need to ask each of you some questions about your understanding of your permission to be here." As the officer began collecting IDs, Elizabeth's behavior became increasingly erratic. She paced alongside the pool, alternating between threats and justifications. "This will never stand. The board will support me. You will regret this." Then, noticing her friend's expressions, "It was just a few pool days when the house was empty anyway. It is not like we damaged anything." When Officer Martinez informed Elizabeth she would be issuing citations for criminal trespassing and unauthorized use of the emergency key, Elizabeth's face crumpled. "This will ruin my reputation. Over a few innocent pool parties. He was not even using it." I stood silently witnessing her meltdown, remembering all the homeowners who had faced her wrath over minor violations. The elderly man with the flower bed, the family with children's toys, the healthcare worker with the car in the driveway. Each had pleaded their case just as desperately, only to be dismissed with Elizabeth's signature line, "Rules exist for a reason." Officer Martinez maintained her professional composure as she explained the legal implications to the increasingly distressed group. Criminal trespassing is a misdemeanor offense that carries potential penalties including fines and, in repeated cases like this one, possible jail time. Unauthorized use of the emergency access key may constitute additional charges of breaking and entering. Elizabeth's friends, now fully clothed and huddled near the gate, looked mortified. One woman approached me directly. "I had no idea this was not authorized. Elizabeth told us she had an arrangement with you because you traveled frequently." "I have never spoken to Elizabeth about my pool," I replied simply, "and I have never given permission for anyone to use it in my absence." Officer Martinez issued citations to Elizabeth for criminal trespassing and misuse of the emergency access key. The other women received warnings rather than citations after it became clear most had genuinely believed they had permission to be there. They departed quickly, avoiding eye contact with both Elizabeth and me. As the group dispersed, Officer Martinez used her radio to request another board member come to the scene. Within 15 minutes, the HOA Vice President, Michael Chen, arrived looking confused and concerned. His expression transformed to shock as Officer Martinez explained the situation and showed him the video evidence on my laptop. This is completely unauthorized," Michael stammered, examining the red-tagged master key that Officer Martinez had confiscated. "These emergency keys are supposed to remain in the lockbox at the community office at all times unless signed out for specific emergencies. She has been using it regularly for pool parties," I explained, showing him the footage from previous weeks. "The access logs show no record of the key being signed out." Michael's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "We will need to call an emergency board meeting immediately. This is a serious breach of trust and protocol." News traveled quickly through Whispering Pines. As I stood in my kitchen that evening, my phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages from neighbors expressing shock, support, and in many cases, sharing their own stories of run-ins with Elizabeth. The community message board, normally quiet except for official announcements and lost pet notices, exploded with activity. "Check your security cameras if you have been away recently," one neighbor posted. "We found footage of unauthorized entry to our back garden 3 times last month." Another wrote, "Anyone else notice personal items missing from garages or storage areas? Small things you might attribute to misplacing." By the following morning, the HOA board had issued an official statement. Effective immediately, Elizabeth Harrington has been suspended from her position as HOA president, pending a full investigation into allegations of unauthorized property access and misuse of emergency resources. An emergency community meeting is scheduled for Saturday at 10 a.m. I received an official letter of apology from the board that afternoon, along with confirmation that all master keys had been recalled and placed in a new secure lockbox with digital tracking for any future emergency use. That evening, I sat alone by my pool, watching the sunset reflect on the water. The space felt different now, reclaimed but somehow changed. For weeks, strangers had invaded this private sanctuary, treating my personal space as a communal resource. The violation left a lingering unease that I knew would take time to fade. Yet beneath the discomfort was something else. A quiet satisfaction that accountability had finally reached someone who had acted untouchable for so long. For years, Elizabeth had wielded HOA rules as weapons while breaking them herself behind closed gates. The exposure did not undo the violation, but it created space for justice that extended beyond just my backyard. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom next door. "How are you holding up after everything?" "Processing," I replied honestly, "but glad it is over." "It is not quite over," he texted back. "Wait until Saturday's meeting. Half the neighborhood has stories they are ready to share now that the dam has broken." Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and unprecedented attendance at the emergency HOA meeting. The community center, normally half empty during regular quarterly meetings, was filled beyond capacity. Extra chairs were brought in from adjacent rooms as homeowners continued to arrive. Every face showed a mix of curiosity, indignation, and for many, a long-suppressed determination. Michael Chen, now acting as interim president, called the meeting to order with visible nervousness. "Before we address recent events, we want to acknowledge that many community members have expressed concerns about their own experiences. We will open the floor for those statements after reviewing the immediate situation that prompted this emergency session." A projector displayed the key findings from the board's initial investigation. Elizabeth had removed the emergency master key from the community office over 3 months earlier without logging it. Security footage from my home confirmed at least 8 unauthorized entries in a 3-week period. Similar reports were now coming in from 6 other homeowners. Elizabeth was not present, having sent a brief statement through her attorney claiming medical distress and requesting privacy. The statement included no acknowledgement of wrongdoing or apology. When the floor opened for community statements, the line formed quickly. Joan Chen, a typically quiet resident who had lived in Whispering Pines for over a decade, was the first to speak. "Last summer, I repeatedly found my patio furniture rearranged and cushions damp. When I mentioned this to Elizabeth, she suggested neighborhood kids might be responsible and recommended I install cameras. Now I wonder if she was deliberately misleading me." Robert Gonzalez, the elderly man who had been repeatedly fined for his flower beds, approached the microphone with the help of his daughter. "For 3 years, I received violation notices for my garden being 2 inches wider than regulation. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's friends on Maple Drive have gardens twice the size with no consequences. This was never about rules. It was about power and who she chose to target." One by one, residents shared similar experiences: selective enforcement, unexplained entry evidence, missing items, and a culture of intimidation that had silenced complaints. What emerged was a clear pattern of abuse of position that had affected dozens of homeowners. The board voted unanimously to remove Elizabeth permanently from her position and to implement new accountability measures for all board activities. A digital tracking system would record all emergency key usage, requiring photo documentation and immediate homeowner notification. Monthly audit reports would be published showing all violation notices issued, ensuring consistent enforcement across the community. 3 weeks after the pool confrontation, I received an unexpected letter. Elizabeth's attorney had negotiated a settlement that included financial compensation for the trespassing, a formal written apology, and her agreement to sell her home and leave Whispering Pines entirely. The apology, while clearly crafted by legal counsel, acknowledged the inexcusable invasion of privacy and breach of community trust. The most surprising outcome, however, was the community transformation that followed. What had been a neighborhood of isolated homeowners fearful of violating obscure rules became a genuinely connected community. The new board, elected a month later, initiated regular social events, simplified the rulebook from 94 pages to 15, and established a mediation process for disputes. 6 months after the incident, I hosted my first neighborhood gathering, a properly invited pool party with an open invitation to nearby residents. Tom brought his famous barbecue. The Gonzalez family arrived with homemade empanadas. The Chens brought lanterns that we floated in the pool as evening fell. As I watched my neighbors enjoying the space that had once been invaded, I reflected on how differently things might have unfolded had I confronted Elizabeth directly that first day. The evidence, the planning, the strategic approach, all had been necessary to overcome years of established power imbalance. Standing by the pool that evening, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends, I raised my glass in a silent toast. Not to revenge, though the justice had been satisfying. Instead, I toasted to boundaries respected, to community rebuilt, and to the courage it takes to stand up against those who believe their authority places them above the rules they enforce on others. Sometimes, the most important form of justice is simply ensuring that rules apply equally to everyone, even those who write them.